Setup of a wireless access point. In this first procedure, we'll configure our wireless access point, or WAP, and we'll connect to the WAP with a web browser. The WAP is the router that we used in the last lab, so we're going to connect to it with the web browser the same exact way. Then we'll enable wireless. On some routers it's enabled by default, but you definitely want to check that. Then we'll set an SSID, or Service Set Identifier, which is just your name of your wireless network. We'll configure the data transfer rate, and in so doing we'll be setting up the wireless standard to be used. We'll select a channel for data transmissions, and we'll configure encryption. Very important to have an encrypted wireless network. Here's a basic diagram of what I want to accomplish. By writing out what you want to do, it can help to organize your thoughts and make things a little bit simpler for you when you're setting up your wireless network. And it acts as documentation later on. Here's the wireless access point, and the name of the wireless network I want to use is Wireless 1. So that's going to be the SSID, or Service Set Identifier. The wireless standard I'd like to use is 802.11n. At the time of this recording, 802.11n is the latest and greatest wireless standard that we have access to. The maximum theoretical data transfer rate is 600 megabits per second, although on today's routers the maximum you're really going to get is 300 megabits per second. And when it comes to usable data transfer, you're talking about 100 megabits per second, about the equivalent of fast Ethernet. Now you may ask, what makes it so fast compared to, say, 802.11g wireless networks? And there's three main reasons for that. The first is MIMO, M-I-M-O, or multiple input, multiple output. This means that we can have, among other things, multiple antennas on the router. Most of the routers today have 3 antennas, and they can work in a special way to send more data. There's a lot of rules behind that, but some of the antennas are paired and some work individually, etc. So most of the routers have 3 antennas, but you may see routers in the future with as many as 4 antennas. That's the maximum that 802.11n allows for right now. Second is frame aggregation. By aggregating frame information together, we can double the transfer rate on the data link level. And third is channel bonding. Channel bonding means that we use 2 channels that are not overlapping together to double the physical data rate, which is also referred to as PHY, or PHY. So a couple reasons why 802.11n is a little bit faster. The channel I'll be picking is 11, and the encryption type I want to use is WPA2. Again, at the time of this recording, WPA2 is the best encryption that we can offer and utilize. So what we're going to do now is connect to the router by ROMing into it with the web browser, and we'll make those configurations. So I'm here at the WAP, and I'm going to log in, and then we want to select the wireless settings link. From here we'll see 3 options: the wireless network setup wizard, adding wireless devices with WPS, and manual wireless network setup. Now the first 2 options will guide you through the process, but I want to show each of the steps, and I want to talk about each of them individually. So we're going to select manual wireless network setup, and you'll see the possible configurations here. The first of these is enable wireless. Some routers have wireless enabled by default. Some don't. It depends. You definitely want to check it either way. If this is not checkmarked, then your wireless router will not be broadcasting and no clients will be able to see it. So we want to checkmark this now, and that's going to enable a bunch of the settings that we can modify. The first of which is wireless network name. Now the default here is D-Link. We try to stay away from default names and numbers and settings because who knows how many people have D-Link routers. You don't want to have any conflicts with companies that are neighbors or houses that are nearby you. So you definitely want to use a unique wireless network name. I'm going to type in Wireless 1, and you can go as unique as you want with that, and that'll be known as the SSID. When clients try to connect to the wireless network, they're going to be looking for that name, Wireless 1. Next is the 802.11 mode. And by default, this is set to mixed or hybrid. It's a mix of N, G, and B networks. And while this is good because it gives you a great scope of wireless network activity and lots of different types of clients can connect, you do lose some of the power of N. So I'm going to select N only. This will be a native N network. Keep in mind, if I do this, all of my clients need to use N wireless network adapters. No B or G adapters will be able to connect. I'm going to deselect auto channel scanning so that I can modify the wireless channel that we'll be using. Take a look at the list of channels. Now, the total range for 802.11n is 2.40 through 2.4835. In the US, that range is a little bit smaller. It starts with channel 1, which is centered at 2.412, and it ends at channel 11, which is centered at 2.462. Now, the default is channel 6, and a lot of routers are set to this by default. And that's one of the reasons I like to use something else, so we can avoid any possible wireless conflicts. One thing you got to keep in mind is 802.11n has a greater range due to its MIMO technology. So there's a greater chance of conflicts with other wireless networks. I usually go towards the top end of the scale here, of the range. So I'm going to use channel 11. And by the way, you may see networks with multiple wireless access points, some of which are set to channel 1, others set to channel 6, and others yet set to channel 11. And this is due to the fact that these channels are non-overlapping. So if you have multiple wireless access points, you don't have any problems with which access point you're trying to connect to. But I'm going to use channel 11. We're going to leave the transmission rate as best automatic, try to get the best physical transfer rate as possible. But I'm going to modify channel width to the 40 megahertz option. This will allow my router to use the channel bonding option. Finally, visibility status. Visible means that the SSID will be visible to wireless clients trying to connect to wireless networks. And I need it to be visible for now until at least I get my clients connected. Then I could set it to invisible. Now, if you set it to invisible, no further clients will be able to connect because the SSID will not be broadcast anymore. And this is a simple way of trying to secure your WAP. So I'm going to leave it as visible for now. And we're going to go down to the wireless security mode. We definitely don't want to leave it as none. If we leave it as none, then anybody will be able to connect to the wireless network without even typing a password. And we have some options here. WEP is a encrypted protocol, but it's a little bit deprecated, and it only had a maximum of 128-bit as far as the encryption goes. So it's better to use WPA. This is a newer version. And we have two options here, WPA Personal and WPA Enterprise. Enterprise requires a Radius server, and I don't have one of those running right now, so we're going to select WPA Personal, which will open up some more possible configurations for WPA. First, it asks the mode we want to use. Well, do we want to use WPA version 1 and 2? No, I just want to use version 2, the latest and greatest. Keep in mind that your client's network adapters will have to be WPA2 compliant. Cipher type. The best type to use is AES, so I'm going to use AES only. We're going to leave the group key update interval as 3600 seconds. And then finally we have to put in a pre-shared key, which is also known as a passphrase. On some routers this is set up as a 64 character hexadecimal code, but on a lot of routers it's 8 to 63 characters. Now the best way to do this is to have 12 to 14 characters, 14 being optimal. This will give you a strong password. Then you want it to be alphanumeric and case sensitive. There should be some capital letters in there and some special characters. That'll give you the best possible password. So I'm going to type in a little passcode now. And that'll pretty much be it. This is a 256-bit passcode, by the way. WPA2 is extremely strong when it comes to password and key protection. And then we'll go ahead and save those settings. And it'll give you some warnings when you're done. Let's take a look at the older router that I have set up. This is the Belkin that's on the network, on the 30 network over there. And we're going to go to wireless for that. Type in the passcode for this guy. And we'll take a look at what we had set up here. If we go to channel and SSID, we'll see that I was set to channel 5. And I called the SSID don't go here. I'm sure that's going to stop anybody. The wireless mode we had set up was G and B, so a hybrid, but there was no N available at the time. And it is broadcasting the SSID currently so that new clients could connect. It's also in a protected mode. If we go to security, we'll see that it's using 128-bit WEP. And you can actually see the code that I'm using. Well, I won't be using it any longer because we're going to swap these routers out. So a little bit of a different router interface, but same information that you're trying to configure basically. Setup of a USB wireless network adapter. In this procedure, I want to install our USB-N wireless network adapter into the laptop, and I want to make sure it's WPA2 compliant. Now, with some Microsoft operating systems, you may need to download an additional software component to make the operating system WPA2 compliant. So, for example, if you needed to download this, you could go to Google and do a search for Windows XP WPA2 download. That'll bring you right to the Microsoft page and the link you need to download that software. That'll require an install and a restart of the computer. So if you want to connect to this type of network, make sure that your OS is WPA2 compliant. We're going to do the installation off the CD, but before I do so, I want to make sure that any other wireless network adapters are disabled. So I'm going to go to my network connections window, and I do have a wireless network connection right now. This is a B connection, and I'm going to disable that. I'm also going to turn it off physically at the laptop. There's a switch there for that. Once that's complete, I'll go to the CD, and I'll start the install by clicking on the Install Drivers link. That'll start up the installation, and we're just going to go through the default answers for this basic installation. That's going to start installing the drivers for the USB adapter, and it's going to ask us to connect the hardware. Now, this hardware comes with an extender cable and ends in a cradle. And the reason for that is because the device itself is a little bit big. It may not fit in all USB ports. So I've connected the device, and you'll notice that a pop-up window comes up, Welcome to the Found New Hardware Wizard. And I'm just going to cancel out of that for Windows. We're doing the installation through the D-Link CD. So we'll click Next. And we'll continue. This is a good driver. It's going to work with Windows XP. So that's going to complete the install. Now it's going to ask if we want to use the Windows Zero configuration utility, which some people call Zero Config. I usually use that program, but I'm actually going to say no for this because it turns out that the D-Link program seems to work a little bit better with this card, or with this adapter I should say, than the Zero configuration utility. So I'm going to say no and click Next. That's going to ask for the wireless network name, and we know that that is wireless 1. That's our SSID. And we're going to put in our encryption key. And that's going to finish up with the connection to the wireless network, and it'll complete the installation of the device. We'll click Finish for that. And at this point, we want to make sure that the connection goes through, so we can check two locations. We can go to Network Connections, and you can see the wireless connection. It's called Wireless Network Connection 9. I'm actually going to rename that, and we'll call that D-Link. N. And we want to make sure that connection is good, and we could do that here and in the properties of this icon and also in the command line. Okay, so first I want to check the status of the device. So I'm going to right click on that and go to status, and I want to make sure it says connected. Now with some of these new N devices, you might get a message here that says acquiring network address, and the message doesn't go away for several minutes. If this is the case, try disabling the device and then re-enabling the device to see if it'll connect to the network. And at worst, you may have to restart the computer itself. But I actually had to do this with this device. I had to disable and re-enable it. And now we have, it says connected, and it says 300 megabits per second. That'll probably go down to around 200 megabits per second or 214 as time goes on. It tells me the signal strength is excellent. We can also take a look in our command line, and if we run an ipconfig/all, we'll see all of our connections, but we're looking for the D-Link N Ethernet adapter. And here it is, and we do have an IP address. And to prove it on the network, we'll just run a quick ping. And we'll go to 172.29.250.1. That is the wireless access point. We're getting replies on the wireless network number. Everything is good to go. So again, don't forget a couple things to check here when you're connecting these devices. First of all, make sure that it says connected. If it says anything else, then you don't have a proper connection, and you may have to disable and re-enable the card or the adapter. Also, make sure that the adapter's at least 6 feet away from the access point. That's a general rule of thumb. If it's too close to the access point, you may have problems with connectivity or with your data transfer rate. With the wireless access point itself, check antenna placement. Make sure that the antennas are at a 45-degree angle from each other, and also make sure that the access point is not near any electrical sources. Finally, update your software. For this device, I want to have the latest driver. You can get that from the manufacturer's website. The CD came with the latest driver because this is a pretty new device. And also for the wireless access point, you want to have the latest ROM. So download the latest firmware from the manufacturer's website for your multifunction device. Now, one more thing I want to show is the actual session that was started with the router. So I'm going to log back into the router, and we just had a session timeout, and I want to go down to network settings, and if we scroll down to the bottom, we'll see the various IPs that have been assigned by the router to whatever devices on the network. And you can see the MAC address that these IPs were assigned to. And you can check that with an ipconfig/all to see which device actually is getting that. And it tells you how long you're going to be able to use that IP address. If you're ever having issues with devices connecting to a wireless network, consider revoking any IP addresses that are going out to wireless devices or to that specific wireless device. That particular IP address may get in the way sometimes. So check the DHCP clients in here and the assigned IPs, and consider revoking them if you're having an issue with the wireless card. Now, one last little point I wanted to make. We use the D-Link software to control our wireless connection, but I also mentioned we could use wireless zero configuration. Here's my original wireless network connection that's built into the laptop. Let's show a few points about wireless zero configuration now. If we right-click on the device and go to View Available Wireless Networks, we'll get a list of wireless networks that are nearby. Now, in some cases, when you try to double tap this and type in the passphrase, it may not work for you. So you may have to go a little bit of a different route when dealing with this program. You may have to right-click on the device and go to Properties, bringing up the Wireless Network Connection Properties window, and then go to the Wireless Networks tab. Now, if you're using the proprietary software from D-Link or Linksys or Belkin, this tab won't be here. But if you've chosen to use Wireless 0 configuration, it will be here. So if we click on that, we'll be able to view the wireless networks from here and also make changes to a network that we want to connect to or are connected to. In some cases, you have to highlight the network and go to Properties and then make the modifications from here. And this is the only way to really get those settings to stick to the network adapter within Wireless 0 configuration. So you'd have to select that protocol, WEP or WPA, and then type in that passphrase. When you do that and OK this window and OK the other window, those changes are more likely to stick. Don't forget that we mentioned you may also have to disable and enable the device, or at worst, restart the computer. And always check that status to make sure it says connected. That's it for Lab 10. In this lab, we showed how to set up a wireless access point, demonstrated how to set up a USB wireless network adapter, and connect to the wireless network. Up next is Lab 11, identifying network devices.